Well, hello there, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Today, we're going to be talking about the Warminster UFO, which, of course, took place over in the UK starting back in the 1960s. Our guest is Kevin Goodman, who is a ufologist and author who's written a book about this, and we're going to be getting his insight and experiences in regards to this UFO flap that, from what I understand, is fairly famous over in the UK. So without any further ado, Mr. Kevin Goodman, are you out there, sir?
I certainly am, Rick. Good evening.
Hey, glad to finally get you on here. So, Kevin, I've looked over the website and some other sites on the web regarding this Warminster UFO flap. I guess they refer to it as a UFO flap. And this is a fairly famous UFO incident over in the UK, is it not?
It is, Rick, but I don't know if the word flap can be actually used. To give you a very brief insight, the phenomenon actually started on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day 1964, and it carried on through probably until the late 1970s due to the amount of sightings which were in the area.
So, starting back in the 60s, now am I correct when I say that unlike most UFO incidences, this started out with not a visual incident, but more of an audio incident where people were hearing strange sounds? Is that correct, or...?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Warminster itself probably encapsulates the entire UFO phenomenon, bar one or two incidents such as abductions and cattle mutilations. The sounds themselves were supposedly akin to having shingle poured onto roofs. And it was reported for about 6 months before the actual full manifestation of the UFO phenomenon actually started.
So, and just to ask you right off the bat, you know, I've never heard of a UFO incident that started off with sounds and then, you know, manifested into this visual. Do you know of any other UFO incidents that's done that type of thing?
No, I don't, to be honest with you. But researching into Warminster, as I have done over the last few years, it's akin to a social cultural phenomenon in so much that I think Warminster happened at the right time. You're talking in the mid-1960s, and there was a sort of start of the hippie movement later on, you know, 66, 67.
Right.
And a lot of people then actually sort of jumped on, not jump on the bandwagon, that's the wrong expression to use probably, but they sort of, you know, it happened at the right time. People were looking for something, possibly looking to the skies rather than conventional religion, and it just took off in that way.
Wow. Very strange, very strange. The other thing that I find interesting about Warminster is that when it did manifest itself into a visual incident, this was a cigar-shaped UFO, correct?
Yeah. I mean, some of the descriptions that were given, a red-hot poker stretching and then bursting asunder with an explosion, no sound. The man who actually championed the Warminster phenomenon, a local journalist by the name of Arthur Shuttlewood, was a complete and utter disbeliever until one day he actually saw the phenomenon for himself out of his flat window.
Wow. You know, isn't it funny how non-believers become believers so quickly after seeing something?
Absolutely. I mean, Shuttlewood himself, you know, it's a rather famous incident in that he actually supposedly recorded this cigar-shaped object out of this flat window, and nothing bar a few first frames actually came out because the rest of the film had been completely burnt out.
Wow. Wow. Now, I want to get to your research involvement, but I want to ask you real quickly. So he took this motion picture film, I take it, and you're saying that first few frames came out. What was the general census of the people? Did they think he was nuts? Did he think he was trying to hoax this? Was it a 50-50 type of thing? What was the public's reaction to this, or to his initial story?
Well, the public's reaction in the town itself was of complete indifference, really, to be quite honest with you. In the August bank holiday period of 1965, the iconic photograph of the Warminster Thing was taken by a young factory worker by the name of Gordon Faulkner. And he claimed that he was just in the right place at the right time to take the picture. This was then sent to a national daily newspaper in the United Kingdom called the Daily Mirror, which ran a centre page spread on it. And that's when, in this country at least, the Warminster phenomenon sort of, if you'll pardon the rather obvious pun here, took off.
Yes. And I noticed you mentioned the word thing. Where did that come from? They call it they don't necessarily call it the Warminster UFO. They call it the Warminster Thing.
Yeah.
And what is that all about?
Well, Warminster is a very small, or in those days it was a small market town in Wiltshire. And a lot of the people around that area had no real knowledge of the UFO phenomenon. So all these strange events that were happening, they just seemed to bracket as the thing.
Ah, so their UFO really wasn't in their vocabulary, so they came up with thing, huh?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, I saw a picture on the now, is this your website, the UFO Warminster.co.uk? Is that your?
Yeah, that's it's run along with my co-author Steve Dewey, who also has written a book as well. But his book is more skeptical in nature than mine.
Ah, okay. Well, on your website, there is a classic picture of you and your friend from about 1970 something. Where it looks like, was that when you first started investigating this thing?
Yeah, it was, because without giving too much away, I was born in 1959. So obviously,
So was I.
We have something in common.
Yep.
So by the time I was old enough to get to Warminster under my own steam, as it were, which was in 1976, I think, the phenomenon was dying down to a degree.
I see. But you've been involved with this since the late 70s, right? Or before?
Yeah, since about 1976, as I say, was when I first went down. And I mean, my friends and I, we actually saw some things that we couldn't rationally explain even today. Warminster, I don't know why it was a focal for what it was, but it obviously touched the hearts and minds of a great deal of people at that time.
Wow. So you first went down there as a teenager, or to this location as a teenager, and I don't want to give away your book, which by the way is entitled the Cradle of
Contact.
Cradle of Contact. Now, there was a blurb that I read about your book where it talks about you and and a group of your friends went to investigate this, and became involved somehow. Is that kind of the basis of the book?
It is the basis of the book. I mean, one reviewer actually referred to the book as a non-fiction George Adamski book written in the style of Catches in the Rye. So it's a sort of coming-of-age book written from someone who was actually up on Cradle Hill, which was the main skywatching location in Warminster from the mid-1970s through to the early 1980s.
Okay. So, can you give us just a brief overview of the entire UFO story? I guess I know you said you don't think it should be called a flap, but we know that it started back in the earlier mid '60s. People started hearing sounds, and then how did it kind of progress from there through the years?
Well, it progressed through, obviously, with the then visual manifestations of these strange lights in the sky. Then, obviously, Gordon Faulkner's photograph, which, to some degree has to be looked at with a certain amount of suspicion, in so much that if you look at the actual photograph itself, we are talking in the age of, obviously, pre-digital photography, in that the photograph of the thing has been enlarged so much that every grain of silver halide is actually visible on the picture. So there is no great sort of veracity you could put over onto the picture because there is no sense of scale. However, Arthur Shuttlewood, who obviously by this time had become a believer in the UFO phenomenon, actually then got a group of people, like-minded people with him, and they would spend many hours up on the hill watching for UFOs, seeing things, so much so that the very famous British astronomer Patrick Moore visited the hill on 2 separate occasions with the BBC film crew to report on, the phenomenon as such. Shuttlewood actually wrote in total 6 books regarding the Warminster phenomenon, and he obviously was the man who was tantamount in keeping the phenomenon in the public eye, so much so that the Rolling Stones apparently did a concert at Longleat House, which is just outside Warminster, and they themselves went up to Cradle Hill for a skywatch one night, along, it is reported, with members of the Moody Blues. So it was, as I said before, a cultural phenomenon, in so much that, you would have people who would go up to the hill, they would see things, and they would go home and report to their friends and sort of say, hey, we went to Warminster, UFO capital of the UK, we saw something. Those friends would go down, see something, they would then tell their friends, and the whole thing was then self-perpetuating for nearly 15 years.
Wow. And just so we can get an idea of where Warminster is, excuse me, let's just say from London. Where is it located in reference to London?
To London, okay. It's about 84 miles west of London. It's in an area which has become known as the Wessex or the Warminster Triangle, which includes areas such as Stonehenge, Glastonbury, and Avebury. So it's in an area of Britain which is steeped in mythology.
Well, I tell you, for the size that the UK is, you seem to have a lot of UFO activity over there. It kind of blows me away. But I did not know that it was close to the Stonehenge as well. So, what do you attribute, or can you attribute anything to these sightings? The fact that it started off as sounds and then went to visual, and it lasted over, a period of so many years. what are your thoughts on this? What do you think it's all about?
Well, if I knew the answers to that, Rick, I would be a very rich man.
You wouldn't be talking to me, right?
Oh, I talk to anyone. As I said before, I think Warminster happened at the right time, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, for starters. I was brought up as a very good little Catholic boy, and I rebelled against the church, and I started to look towards other reasons for our existence. And I was not the only one in that time. As I say, I mean, I have organised for the last 6 years or so now an annual Skywatch to be held on the August bank holiday, normally anyway, on the August bank holiday here in the UK on Cradle Hill, which is to sort of celebrate the past history of Warminster. And it's amazing the number of people who actually turn up, who were there in the 1960s and in the 1970s. As I said before, it touched a great deal of people. Psychologically, I don't know. But there was obviously something that happened in that town that defies rational explanation.
Now, I did read somewhere, I believe, that there is a military base somewhat close to Warminster. Any thoughts there as to a possible military link?
There is possible. It's possible. I mean, where Cradle Hill is, it nestles right onto the Salisbury Plain training area. And Warminster is home to what was then known as the School of Infantry. It's now known as the School of Land Warfare. Now, I would like to tell you of a sighting that I had in Easter of 1977.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah. Unfortunately, unless anybody has been to Warminster, and I doubt that many people who listen to this probably have, but that is beside the point, a friend and I were walking down from the infamous Copse area at the top of Cradle Hill, and we looked across towards the golf club, which is on a hill by the name of Elm Hill. And coming in from that direction, from over the town, were 4 red lights, equally distantly spaced apart. They then passed over an area called Cop Heap, which is a hill just outside the town where it's reputed that an Anglo-Saxon chieftain is supposed to have been buried. Then passed on over to an area called Battlesbury Hill, which is directly in front of Cradle Hill. Now, these lights stayed in a complete horizontal line, just flashing red. And they must have been in this line for about, I don't know, a minute and a half. And then the extreme left-hand object shot off at speed horizontally and then performed a flawless 90-degree turn without stopping and shot straight upwards. Now, this was in 1976. There is nothing that we have now militarily that can perform any form of maneuver like that. If there was anything living on board that craft with the technology that we have today, they would have been strawberry jam.
Yes, they would have been liquefied due to the G-force of that type of turn, right?
Yeah.
Now, you were with a friend when this happened?
Yes. And then after about a minute, after that first object shot off, the other 3 remaining objects then just shot straight up into the sky, out of sight. Now, weather conditions on that night were perfect. It was a cold, moonless night. There was very little wind, and you could hear the trains going through Warminster Station, which is about a mile away from where we were standing. And these objects, whatever they were, didn't make a bloody sound. They were totally silent. There was no engine noise, nothing.
Wow. I mean, what did you guys think when you saw this? Were you just stunned?
I think stunned is a very polite word to use. We just stood there, actually slack-jawed. And the interesting thing is that we were staying, actually, in a small cottage on the slopes of Cradle Hill, with a woman who was working as a secretary at one of the farms in the area, and her daughter had come up with us, and she'd not heard of the Warminster phenomenon. And, she, like us, she was just rooted to the spot. You just think to yourself, what the hell have we just seen?
I only wish that I someday will be able to see something such as what you saw. It really must just change your whole outlook on things to see something that incredible.
It does indeed. I mean, I can also, to your listeners, recommend another very good book by someone who else was in Warminster in those days, a chap by the name of Mike Oram, who has written a book called Does It Rain in Other Dimensions? Mike has actually been over to Area 51 and has also seen and experienced some very strange things in that area. So whether or not we are actually not touched, but whether or not there are certain people who are more in tune with the phenomenon, I don't know.
Well, listen, Kevin, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today. Definitely like to stay in touch with you, and perhaps we can get together again and discuss this in a little more detail. But I wanted to, before we go, I wanted to give out your website and then also your book again. The website is ufo-warminster.co.uk. And again, then the book is UFO Warminster, Cradle of Contact. Is there any other sites or pages or anything that you would like to give out, or does that pretty much cover it? Can they get to all these places through that one?
That pretty much covers it. I mean, you can, via the UFO Warminster website, you can contact myself and Steve Dewey. There is also a Facebook page, UFO Warminster.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah, which I run. So, I mean, yeah, that's really basically about it. I mean, keeping a full-time job, and writing, researching, because I'm also looking at writing another book, which is in some respects non-UFO based. I mean, if any of your listeners will know the name of Jerry Anderson, who was the man behind Thunderbirds, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, all those classic sci-fi programs. I also run a web page on Facebook as well for him, RIP Jerry Anderson. And I'm working on a little project at the moment, hopefully, which will see fruition along with Jerry's son, Jamie. So I am absolutely sort of inundated. When I'm not free, I'm at work, and when I'm free, I'm tied to this computer.
Well, listen, I appreciate you taking out the time to talk to us today, Kevin. I really do. It's been a pleasure, and I have learned a lot, I must say. I'm always amazed by people's experiences and the knowledge they have on ufology. It's just a very, very strange topic, is it not?
It is indeed. And I mean, if anybody has, had their interest piqued by this, I would also suggest that they track down Arthur Shuttlewood's books as well, because obviously, although they're a little bit more sensationalist than they should be, I suppose, it will give someone also a very good grounding in the Warminster UFO phenomenon.
Very good, very good. Well, I'll definitely include that in the overall graphics here on screen. Well, listen, Kevin, thanks again. It's been a pleasure, like I said, and we will stay in touch and keep looking up in the sky.
I will do indeed. And you never know, one of these days I might see something else I can't explain.
And please let me know when you do.
I will, Rick.
Okay.
All
Kevin,
right.
You have a good evening.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The answer is to keep it.
course, took place over in the UK starting back in the 1960s. Our guest is Kevin Goodman, who is a ufologist and author who's written a book about this, and we're going to be getting his insight and experiences in regards to this UFO flap that, from what I understand, is fairly famous over in the UK. So without any further ado, Mr. Kevin Goodman, are you out there, sir?
I certainly am, Rick. Good evening.
Hey, glad to finally get you on here. So, Kevin, well, hello there, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Today, we're going to be talking about the Warminster UFO, which...
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Warminster itself probably encapsulates the entire UFO phenomenon, bar one or two incidents such as abductions and cattle mutilations. The sounds themselves were supposedly akin to having shingle poured onto roofs. And it was reported for about 6 months before the actual full manifestation of the UFO phenomenon actually started.
So, and just to ask you right off the bat, you know, I've never heard of...
Stroke Christmas Day 1964, and it carried on through probably until the late 1970s due to the amount of sightings which were in the area.
So, starting back in the 60s, now am I correct when I say that unlike most UFO incidences, this started out with not a visual incident, but more of an audio incident where people were hearing strange sounds? Is that correct? Or I've looked over the website and some other sites on the web regarding this Warminster UFO flap. I guess they refer to it as a UFO flap. And this is a fairly famous UFO incident over in the UK, is it not?
It is, Rick, but I don't know if the word flap can be actually used. To give you a very brief insight, the phenomenon actually started on Christmas Eve